The red and blue lights painted our perfect little street like a crime scene at 7:02 a.m. On a Tuesday, Cynthia Whitaker, self-appointed queen of Evergreen Terrace, stood on her chemically sterilized lawn in full makeup and pearls, shrieking into her phone. "Officer, she's destroying our property values right now. Come quick." My wife Elena was on her knees in the dirt, humming softly, hands black with rich California soil, gently tucking in another cluster of native poppies and lupins that glowed like living gold against the beige hellscape of our HOA-approved neighborhood. The squad car rolled up. The young officer stepped out, took 3 steps toward the felon, then froze mid-stride, jaw literally dropping open like a cartoon character. Cynthia's clipboard clattered to the sidewalk. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, producing nothing but a high-pitched wheeze. Because nobody had bothered to mention that the woman she was trying to arrest for gardening was the Honorable Elena Caldwell, the same municipal court judge who'd sentenced half the cops in this county. Let me back up before you think this was some random Tuesday meltdown. I'm James Caldwell, 57, retired paramedic after 31 years of scraping burn victims off freeways while sane people ran the other way. Elena and I moved to Evergreen Terrace 3 years ago chasing that quiet retirement fantasy. Curving streets named after trees long ago bulldozed, houses painted in 12 shades of "Don't You Dare Stand Out." Retirees like us mixed with young families whose kids still believed sidewalks were for chalk art instead of citation targets. Our modest ranch-style house had the biggest front yard on Maple Lane, and Elena had dreamed of a real garden since her court calendar left zero time for anything but potted herbs on our old balcony. Cynthia Whitaker, 61, lived in the McMansion at the top of the hill, the one with pointless Roman columns and a flagpole bigger than most people's egos. Former real estate shark who ran the HOA like it was her personal fiefdom. She ironed her jeans, color-coded her complaint forms, and spoke in that syrupy "bless your heart" voice that somehow always ended with a $250 fine. For the first 2 years, everything was nauseatingly polite. We paid dues on time, kept grass at the sacred 4-inch height, never parked our sensible sedan on the driveway overnight. Elena waved at everyone during her morning jogs. I jump-started batteries in winter and fixed Mrs. Alvarez's sprinkler. Normal neighbor stuff. Then this spring Elena finally did it. She ripped out the thirsty Kentucky bluegrass that drank more water than a Vegas fountain and replaced it with native California wildflowers. Poppies that exploded orange every sunrise, lupins in deep purple, blanket flowers that laughed at drought. She spent weekends on her knees, the sweet earthy smell mixing with lavender borders while humming old courtroom ballads. That's when Queen Cynthia decided the revolution had to be crushed. I was sipping my coffee on the porch, savoring that first bitter hit, watching Elena deadhead spent blooms when I heard the sharp click-click-click of designer heels on concrete. 7:30 a.m. And there was Cynthia marching up our walkway like she was serving divorce papers, wearing pressed slacks and enough perfume to gas a small army. "This landscaping is in direct violation of community aesthetic standards," she announced, waving a paper that looked printed on a 1998 inkjet. "I'm issuing a $250 fine for non-conforming vegetation. You have 10 days. Elena stood slowly, brushing soil from her knees, and used the calm voice that made defense attorneys sweat in her courtroom. "Which specific covenant are we violating, Mrs. Whitaker?" Cynthia's nostrils flared like she smelled something illegal. Section 7.2 clearly states all front yards must maintain uniform community aesthetic standards. Elena smiled the small smile that usually preceded a contempt charge. Actually, Section 7.2 only mentions removing dead or diseased plants and keeping grass at reasonable height. These are healthy native species. Nothing about aesthetic standards or color palettes. Cynthia's face did that thing where it tried to stay Botox smooth, but failed spectacularly. I know what the board meant when we wrote the rules. And just like that, the mask slipped. We weren't dealing with an honest mistake. We were dealing with a woman who believed her personal taste was legally binding. Over the next week, the pattern became vomit-inducingly clear. Old Mr. Delgado, 76-year-old Korean War vet, got hit with a $175 fine for growing tomatoes in the front yard where his late wife once kept prize roses, inappropriate edible display. Single mom Lisa Chun, working 2 jobs, paid $350 to scrub her kids' chalk art off her own driveway because temporary markings degrade curb appeal. Every target was either elderly, broke, or just different enough to offend Cynthia's vision of beige perfection. Elena set her coffee mug down that morning with a quiet click that meant someone was about to lose. "We're not paying," she said simply. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived with the return address embossed in gold because of course it was. The fine had magically doubled to $500. An emergency board meeting had been held. Unanimous vote. 10 days or lien on the house. One tiny problem. Elena called every board member that afternoon. "Emergency meeting?" Mr. Delgado's gravelly voice crackled over speakerphone. "I was in Fresno with my grandkids all week." "Who the hell called a meeting?" Same story from 2 others. Turns out Cynthia's unanimous vote consisted of herself, her bridge partner Gladys, and Gladys's husband, who slept through every meeting with his mouth open. Elena had memorized Colorado HOA law during a mind-numbingly boring continuing education seminar years ago. State statute required 14 days written notice and a hearing before any fine. Cynthia had done 0 of that. The fine was legally worthless. So Elena filed a formal complaint with the state HOA oversight board using forms she knew better than most lawyers. That's when the real fun started. Every morning at 6 o'clock sharp, Cynthia's white Mercedes would cruise our street like a shark that had read too many true crime novels. She'd park across from our house, engine running, AC blasting in 68-degree weather, and click away with her phone, photographing a single brown blade of grass, a garden hose coiled instead of hung per regulation. Yesterday's newspaper still in the driveway at 6:17 a.m. The slam of her car door became our neighborhood rooster. Mr. Delgado started timing his walks to wave cheerfully every morning just to watch her scramble. "Morning, Cynthia. Getting your steps in for heart health." Her smile looked like it hurt. While Cynthia was busy building her Pinterest board of evidence, Elena was quietly building something far more dangerous, a paper trail thicker than Cynthia's fake eyelashes. She knocked on doors during evening jogs, chatted at the grocery store, collected stories like trading cards. The widow on Pine Court got cited for excessive bird feeding because Cynthia decided songbirds were pest attractants. Lisa Chen's kids' bikes in their own driveway earned a warning, then a fine, then a threat of towing. Every single victim was vulnerable in Cynthia's eyes, easy marks who would pay rather than fight. Then came the moment Elena's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. She had cross-referenced every fine date with board meeting minutes for the past 2 years. Every single penalty had been issued during weeks when at least 3 board members were out of town. Cynthia wasn't just power-tripping. She was strategically timing her reign of terror. The smell of fresh printer ink and righteous fury filled our home office as Elena built her counterfile 1 page at a time. Every photograph Cynthia took, every made-up rule, every dollar she tried to squeeze was being cataloged by a woman who understood admissible evidence better than most prosecutors. Cynthia was playing checkers with a chess grandmaster who also happened to wear the black robe for a living. A week after the state complaint, Cynthia dropped her next masterpiece, a certified letter demanding our garden undergo full architectural review committee approval. 48 hours notice. Community center basement. Bring documentation. She was even bringing an expert witness, her golf buddy who sold overpriced mulch at the garden center. Elena hung up the phone and smiled the smile that defense attorneys still have nightmares about. "She wants a hearing," she said, opening the closet. "Let's give her one she'll never forget." Thursday evening, 6:30 p.m. The community center basement smelled like decades of burnt coffee and broken dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed like dying bees. Cynthia sat at a folding table flanked by Gladys and the sleeping husband, looking like she was chairing the UN instead of arguing about flowers. She had brought a briefcase to a garden hearing. Elena walked in wearing her full judicial robes, black, perfectly pressed, nameplate gleaming. Hair in the severe bun she saved for sentencing day. The psychological effect was instant. Cynthia's spine visibly liquefied. Gladys dropped her reading glasses. The husband woke up and whispered, "Is she here to arrest us?" Elena's voice carried the same quiet authority that once made a career criminal beg for mercy. Good evening. I understand we're here to discuss whether native California wildflowers violate community covenants. Let's begin with the actual text of Section 7.2, shall we? She opened her briefcase and laid out a legal brief complete with case law, ecological studies, and color photos of every plant with Latin names. Cynthia's expert turned out to be a guy who thought poppies were weeds. When Elena asked him to differentiate between Escalation californica and its cousins, he stared like she'd asked him to recite the Bill of Rights backward. Then Elena casually mentioned she'd photographed Cynthia's own backyard that afternoon. Mrs. Whitaker, could you explain why your ornamental fence exceeds the 6-foot limit by 10 inches without architectural review? And your decorative koi pond, built without any committee approval whatsoever? And the hot tub placement that violates the 15-foot setback by 4 feet. The scratch of Elena's pen taking notes was the loudest sound in the room. Every excuse, every stutter, every contradiction was being recorded by someone who had spent 14 years listening to professional liars. Mr. Delgado and Lisa Chun sat in the folding chairs like a jury of the damned, watching Cynthia's empire of beige crumble in real time. This hearing is over, Cynthia finally squeaked. Elena smiled sweetly. Actually, Mrs. Whitaker, I have one more question. When exactly did this Architectural Review Committee receive legal authority to regulate indigenous vegetation? The silence that followed could have been used as a murder weapon. Exactly 7 days later, the next letter arrived in every mailbox, red-stamped, Emergency Special Assessment. According to Cynthia's calculations, the HOA now needed an immediate $4,800 from every household to cover legal defense against frivolous complaints and harassment by problem residents. Translation: one family's refusal to bow had forced the entire neighborhood to pay for her ego. She scheduled a mandatory meeting in the same basement where she'd just been humiliated. Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m. The place was packed tighter than a Black Friday sale. Retirees clutched the assessment letters like ransom notes. Toddlers screamed. The air reeked of anxiety and yesterday's church potluck. Cynthia stood at the front in a navy blazer that screamed, "Trust me with your retirement." PowerPoint ready on a projector older than dial-up. Friends and neighbors, she began in her best real estate voice. We face an unprecedented crisis because one household has chosen to wage war on our shared standards. She clicked to the slide with the $4,800 number. People actually gasped. Elena stood up from the back row wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking like any other concerned neighbor. But when she spoke, the entire room shifted. Before we vote on assessments, Mrs. Whitaker, could you clarify exactly which legal expenses we're covering? Cynthia's smile twitched. The costs of defending against your harassment and state complaints, obviously. Elena nodded politely. Interesting. Because according to the Colorado Open Records request I filed last week, the HOA has paid $52,000 over the past 2 years to Whitaker Property Consulting, your company, for various services. A ripple of whispers turned into a wave. Elena held up a thick folder. Invoices show $9,500 paid for landscape consultation during months when zero landscaping was approved or performed. Mr. Delgado's $50 weed removal fine went straight to your company. Lisa Chin's check for her children's chalk art was deposited into the same account. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Retirees who had been ready to vote yes were now clutching their letters like weapons. Furthermore, Elena continued, voice calm as a death sentence, the HOA's corporate status was dissolved 18 months ago for failure to file annual reports. Every fine, every fee, every assessment collected since then has been deposited into accounts controlled personally by Mrs. Whitaker for an organization that legally no longer exists. The basement erupted. Mr. Delgado's voice boomed like a drill sergeant. Lady, are you telling us you've been stealing our money? Cynthia's face went through every shade of panic available at Sephora. She grabbed her briefcase, knocked over her chair, and fled up the stairs shouting something about consulting her attorney. The slam of the door sounded exactly like a gavel coming down for the last time. What Cynthia didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Elena had spent the previous week with her paralegal friend at the courthouse diving into corporate records and banking regulations. The smoking gun was public record at the Secretary of State's office. Missed filings in 2022, 2023, and 2024. For 18 months, Cynthia had been collecting money for a ghost corporation. Over $28,000 had vanished into accounts only she could access. And that was just the appetizer. The main course was the discriminatory enforcement pattern that matched federal fair housing violation databases like a fingerprint. Every target, elderly, single parents, anyone who didn't fit the beige mold, had been chosen with surgical precision. That night, Elena spread the evidence across our kitchen table like battle plans. Bank records, corporate filings, violation notices, timestamps, everything needed to prove systematic fraud and discrimination. "We could turn this over to the DA tomorrow," she told me, sipping chamomile tea. "Cynthia would probably plea, pay restitution, get probation. But that doesn't give Mr. Delgado his memorial tomatoes back. Doesn't erase the fear in Lisa Chen's eyes every time she saw Cynthia's car. Justice isn't just punishment. It's making sure the harm stops and the community heals." She smiled the smile I'd waited 30 years to see again. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give Cynthia Whitaker exactly what she's been demanding all along. A community that follows every single rule, including the ones about fraud, embezzlement, and civil rights violations." The next morning, our kitchen became mission control for what Elena jokingly called Operation Poppy Justice. By 8 a.m., we had the unlikeliest legal team in suburbia. Elena with her legal pads, Mr. Delgado with military precision, Lisa Chun with her data spreadsheets and ring footage from 6 different neighbors. The smell of Elena's coffee cake mixed with printer ink and pure spite as we mapped the 3-pronged attack. First, restore the HOA's legal standing properly and elect Mr. Delgado as interim president. Second, freeze Cynthia's accounts and recover every stolen dollar with triple damages under consumer protection laws. Third, make sure this never happened again by exposing the pattern statewide. We filed the reinstatement papers that same day. Mr. Delgado was officially in charge pending elections. Lisa created a private group chat for victims to share evidence safely. And Elena prepared for the kind of legal reckoning that would make Cynthia wish she'd stayed in real estate. Cynthia did not go quietly. Within 48 hours, she filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Commission on Judicial Discipline, accusing Elena of weaponizing her judicial position to intimidate a dedicated volunteer. She hired a bottom-feeder private investigator who started photographing our house and Elena's courthouse parking spot. Anonymous flyers appeared on every windshield calling Elena corrupt Judge Caldwell, above the law. Then came the federal lawsuit, Thornfield v. Caldwell, claiming civil rights violations under color of law. She demanded damages and Elena's removal from the bench. The paperwork was so ridiculous it could have been used as toilet paper in a clown college. But the real low point came when Cynthia cornered Elena's 79-year-old mother in our driveway and demanded she control her daughter's behavior. My mother-in-law, bless her, looked Cynthia dead in the eye and said, "Sweetheart, the only thing I need to control is my urge to laugh in your face." Monday morning, Cynthia played her final card. She called 911 again, this time claiming Elena was destroying community property by continuing to tend the wildflower garden that Cynthia now insisted belonged to the entire HOA. Half the neighborhood showed up before the squad car even arrived. Mr. Delgado stood with arms crossed like a retired general. Lisa had her phone recording. Even old Mrs. Alvarez shuffled over with her walker. Officer Ray Kowalski stepped out, took one look at Elena kneeling peacefully among the poppies in her gardening clothes, then looked at Cynthia vibrating in her power suit on the sidewalk. "Ma'am," he said with the patience of a man who had seen everything, "can you explain what crime is occurring here?" Cynthia waved her folder like it was the Magna Carta. Destruction of community property. Violation of lawful HOA authority. Ray walked over to Elena, who stood and brushed dirt from her knees with quiet dignity. "Your Honor," he said, and the 2 words hit the morning air like a thunderclap. Cynthia's pointing finger froze. Her folder slipped, scattering papers across her perfect lawn like legal confetti. Her mouth opened and closed, producing only strangled squeaks. "She's your Judge Caldwell?" The crowd's murmur turned into open laughter. Ray looked back at Cynthia. "Ma'am, You're filing a police report that a municipal court judge is gardening in her own yard. Within 48 hours, Cynthia resigned from every HOA position across 4 different communities where her consulting company operated. Her federal lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The state attorney general moved fast once local news picked up the story. Headlines about a suburban embezzler stealing from retirees tend to spike during election season. Cynthia pled guilty to theft, fraud, and filing false reports. 3 years probation, full restitution plus penalties, and a lifetime ban from any HOA board in Colorado. The restitution checks arrived like Christmas in July. Mr. Delgado's tomato plants took first prize at the county fair 3 months later, and he made sure to send Cynthia a photo. We held our first legitimate election that October with actual ballots and proper notice. Mr. Delgado won president unanimously, though he spent his acceptance speech complaining he just wanted to grow vegetables in peace. Lisa became treasurer because she was the only one under 60 who understood spreadsheets. The recovered $37,000 funded a community garden where neighbors now grow whatever the hell they want. Tomatoes, poppies, pride flags, you name it. The scent of fresh basil and blooming lupins replaced the smell of fear every summer morning. Our first annual Wildflower Festival happened exactly 1 year after Cynthia's breakdown. Kids laughed, bluegrass played, Elena's garden served as the centerpiece, and Mr. Delgado's military-grade barbecue could be smelled 3 blocks away. Home values actually rose 17% once word spread that Evergreen Terrace was now run by adults instead of a clipboard tyrant. The state legislature even passed the Caldwell Accountability Act, tightening HOA oversight. Elena now speaks at judicial conferences nationwide, always ending with the same line. Justice works best when it's applied equally, even to women who iron their jeans. Last month, a new neighbor asked Mr. Delgado why our neighborhood had such a reputation for being drama-free. He grinned, took a sip of coffee, and said, "We had enough drama to last a lifetime. Difference is, we finally got rid of the person causing it." As for Cynthia, she moved to Nevada where she's already been cited twice for aggressive behavior toward maintenance staff. Some people really never learn. Here's the question I want you to answer honestly in the comments. When Cynthia called the police on a woman peacefully planting flowers in her own yard, who was really destroying property values, the gardener who brought color and life to the neighborhood, or the woman who used fake authority to steal thousands and terrorize her neighbors for years? Was the real criminal the one with the garden trowel or the one with the clipboard? Drop your verdict below. We read every single one. And if this story made you want to check your own HOA filings tonight, hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell, because next week we're exposing the parking enforcement Karen who tried to ticket the new city transportation director's car while the director stood right there watching. Community justice tastes sweeter than wildflower honey. See you in the comments, folks.